Vanya has always been labeled as an underachiever. Since childhood, Vanya and Marina lived next to each other. Starting from first grade, Vanya would dutifully carry Marina's briefcase to and from school, never uttering a word. Marina would often tease him, asking why he remained silent. Vanya would simply snort and question, "What should I say?" Marina would laugh, encouraging him to continue his silence. Despite this, Vanya would only sniff louder than usual whenever Marina attracted attention from others as she grew older. Vanya's mother would sigh and suggest, "Why don't you find a nice girl for yourself, son? Marina is no good, and a relationship with her won't lead anywhere." But Vanya would only continue to sniff and persistently accompany Marina. Whether she went to the club or spent time with other guys, Vanya would faithfully follow, enduring the occasional blows from Marina's frustrated fists. Marina would exclaim, "Just leave me alone. You're exhausting me. You scare away all the guys I'm interested in." Vanya, without glancing at her, would calmly reply, "Those guys are bad news. You don't need them." Marina would retort, "And what about you? Are you the good guy? You're just a jerk." Vanya would take offense but chose to conceal his feelings. Eventually, Vanya was drafted into the army. The experience was tough, but he threw himself into his duties, trying not to think about Marina. He filled his free time with intense workouts at the gym, and upon his return, Vanya looked like a stunning model straight out of a magazine. Girls began to notice him, eager for his attention, but all he wanted was to see Marina, and Marina was also delighted by his transformation. Marina had a suspicion that she might be pregnant. It was not confirmed, but she remembered a risky period 2 weeks ago when she neglected to use protection. Vanya's presence came in handy at this moment. It took only a minute to seduce him, especially when he looked like a real man now. Then it happened again, and a month later, Marina confessed to Vanya that she was late, hinting at the possibility of pregnancy. And Vanya, he was overjoyed. He couldn't believe how happy he was. Despite his mother's protests and tears, insisting that the child was not his, Vanya remained steadfast. His mother eventually relented and started preparing for the wedding. Marinka gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Vanya lovingly took care of his daughter, gently rocking her in his arms, washing diapers, and cooking porridge. Marinka was exhausted and desperately needed some rest. In the evenings, Vanya would ask a neighbor to look after Sonia so Marinka could go out and enjoy herself. In the mornings, she would come back, tired but happy, and fall asleep. Vanya knew everything but kept silent, fearing that Marinka would take their daughter away from him. He didn't want to see Marinka again. Eventually, Marinka seemed to calm down. She stopped running around and Vanya began to feel more at ease. He reassured his mother that things were improving, but she remained skeptical. Vanya's mother, for reasons she couldn't quite explain, became very attached to little Sonichka. Despite her doubts, she couldn't help but love such an angelic child. When Vanya was working at night, she would often take care of her granddaughter, refusing to let Marinka be alone with her. The mother believed that it wasn't the biological father, but the one who raised the child who truly mattered. She had made up her mind and found solace in showering Sonichka with all her love. Then one day, Vanya returned home from work to find Marinka sitting with a suitcase in front of her. His heart sank as she looked at him and cried, "Forgive me, Vanechka. I never loved you before, but now I do. I love you so much that it's consuming me. I'm leaving you to be with him, but I will go and take Sonichka with me." Vanya's gaze lingered on her for an extended moment, his mind consumed by contemplation. Then, with remarkable composure, he uttered, "I cannot surrender, Sonia. It would be senseless to expose a child to the horrors of brothels. I will find a way to manage on my own." Marinka recoiled in shock, unable to fathom his refusal. "What do you mean you won't give her away? Sonia is my daughter. I cannot imagine life without her." Enraged, Vanya pounded his fist against the table, causing one of its legs to break. If you insist on lingering here, then go. I will never allow you to take our daughter into those sordid places." Though Marinka trembled with fear, unaccustomed to witnessing such fierce determination from her husband, she mustered the courage to make one final attempt. However, his unwavering gaze overpowered her, compelling her to flee into the street and into a waiting taxi without even glancing back. Left alone, Vanya sat in silence, immersed in his thoughts. After some time, he rose from his seat and made his way to his mother's house. As soon as he opened the door, Sonetchka bounded towards him, throwing her little arms around his neck. "Daddy's here," she exclaimed joyfully. Mother's intuition kicked in immediately, sensing that something was wrong. "Where's Marinka?" she asked urgently. "Sonetchka, quickly pack your toys in your backpack. We'll be going home soon," Mother instructed, worriedly searching for her missing daughter. The girl hurriedly obeyed, while Vanya stood nearby, his expression revealing that he held the answers. "She's gone," Vanya said, his words hanging heavily in the air. "Why did she leave, and why are you so nonchalant about it? You're like pulling teeth to get any information out of you," Mother exclaimed, frustrated by Vanya's lack of transparency. "I don't know where she went, but she left with her boyfriend," Vanya admitted, causing his mother to collapse into a seat. "Boyfriend? And you're telling me this so calmly? What about Sonetchka?" Mother's worry deepened. "I didn't give Sonetchka away. Will you help me?" Vanya pleaded, hoping his mother would support him through this ordeal. "Yes, of course, I'll help you. But how did this happen?" Mother asked, attempting to understand the situation. "Well, she said she never loved me, that she had a burning feeling in her chest." Vanya trailed off, his voice filled with hurt. "I wish I could tell you where she's feeling that burn," Mother retorted sarcastically. Just then, Sonetchka entered the kitchen. "Daddy, are we going home now?" she asked innocently. "Yes, we're going home. Tomorrow is Daddy's day off, and we'll go to the park and the merry-go-round," Vanya replied, trying to distract his daughter from the gravity of the situation. "Hooray! And what about Mom?" Sonetchka inquired. "Mom had to leave for work. She's on a business trip," Mother explained, masking her own sadness. Sonetchka initially felt disheartened, but quickly found a silver lining. "Does that mean I can have Mom's ice cream?" she asked, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Mother, having wiped away her tears, couldn't help but let out a laugh. "You're quite cunning, Sonia," Mother praised her daughter's resourcefulness. As they prepared to leave, Mother gently touched Vanya's arm. "Vanya, what are you going to do? Are you going to get a divorce?" "Yes, I've had enough," Vanya confirmed, his determination evident. "That's the right decision. By the way, Katusha asked about you again." Mother started, but Vanya cut her off, not wanting to rehash old conversations. "Mom, let's not go down that road again," Vanya interjected. "Fair enough. I'll keep quiet," Mother conceded, understanding her son's desire to move forward and not dwell on the past. Vanya placed Sonetchka into the car, took his position behind the wheel, and exited the premises. For some reason, his thoughts turned to Katya, a girl who was once the daughter of his mother's friend. Tragically, her mother passed away, leaving Katya all alone at just 18 years old. She blended into the background, like a gray mouse, always choosing to stay invisible. Some individuals, whether from a lack of confidence or out of habit, tend to linger in the shadows and never speak up. Katya was one of those people. Even in their childhood, she never actively participated in boisterous games, instead quietly observing from the sidelines. Vanya attempted to recall her face, but he struggled to conjure up any concrete image. Naturally, she was nowhere near as stunning as Marinka. Vanya and Sonetchka started living together. However, it wasn't as if they were completely alone, since Vanya's mother, Alla Stepanovna, provided a great deal of support. She recently retired and had an abundance of free time. Initially, Sonetchka would inquire about her own mother, but over time, those questions ceased. Vanya appeared to find solace in his solitude and grew accustomed to it. He left his job and established a small business of his own. Surprisingly, things took off smoothly right from the start. People recognized Ivan as an honest man, someone who always kept his promises and eagerly availed themselves of the services offered by his firm. 2 years elapsed. On one Sunday afternoon, Vanya and Senetka ventured out into the yard. Semechka occupied the swings while Vanya made use of the exercise equipment. It took him a moment to notice a woman carrying a child, silently observing him. When he finally caught sight of her, he was dumbfounded. Before him stood Marinka, visibly thinner and oddly dressed, with a small boy in her arms. "Vanya, please forgive me, I can no longer wander. Andreyushka is hungry, and we have been living in the alleyways for a month, too ashamed to show our faces." That's when Senetka realized who was standing in front of her. Instead of throwing herself onto her mother's neck, the girl took her father's hand and pleaded with him through her eyes. It was morning outside, with no one around, but Vanya noticed their neighbors peering through their windows. Some even opened their windows to hear better. "Let's go inside the apartment," Vanya suggested. "There's no need to provide entertainment for the neighbors. We can talk there." With those words, Senetka rushed to her mother, and Marinka cried, kissed Sonia, and embraced her. Once inside the apartment, Vanya spoke up, "Feed the child and put him to bed. Then we can discuss everything." Marina promptly cooked porridge and fed little Andrei, who was only 6 months old. Vanya silently observed the scene. When the boy was nourished and blissfully asleep, Senetka stayed with him while Marina returned to the kitchen. She sat down in front of Ivan on a chair. "Here, my husband abandoned me," she began. "He promised me the world, but he himself. He started drinking, then began to beat me. And when Andrew was born, he disappeared completely. A month ago, he reappeared with a new wife and threw us out on the street. Vanechka, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm asking you not to turn me away. I'll be like your devoted dog. I'll do anything you ask. I have nowhere else to go. My parents' apartment is now my brother's, and you know he won't let me in." Vanya remained silent for a prolonged period of time before speaking up. "For the time being, you will live in the small room. We will figure things out from here." Time passed, and almost imperceptibly, Marinka moved into the master bedroom. They continued living as before, but the family grew in size. Andreyushka grew up and started calling Vanya daddy. Sonechka began attending school. Ivan's mother did not visit them for a long time, only calling her son a fool and Marinka a whore. When Sonechka entered 2nd grade, Ivan discovered that his wife had cheated on him once again. It was like a sudden shock to him. He had noticed how initially she showed great interest in the children, but gradually lost interest, only becoming agitated when having to deal with them. Vanya remained silent, observing everything. Then, there were a couple of occasions when he arrived home while the children were at the garden or school, and Marinka was absent. In the evening, she claimed to have been at home all day. Gritting his teeth, he decided to hire a private detective. Within a week, he had obtained multiple pictures of Marina with her lover. Vanya arrived at his yard, the darkness beginning to settle in, and no one else in sight. He did not want to go back home. He simply didn't know what to do. Taking a bottle of whiskey out of the trunk, he sat down in the gazebo and started drinking. As he continued drinking, he contemplated his life. "May I join you?" He heard a startle in his voice. Standing before him was a young woman who seemed vaguely familiar. It was Katya, the one who had always harbored a crush on him. "Please sit down. What are you doing awake?" Vanya asked. "I can't sleep. Then I saw you through the window, so I came down." "What are you drinking?" Katya inquired. "Don't ask me," Vanya replied. "Marinka, you shouldn't. You'll get drunk, and you might do something you'll regret." Katya expressed concern. "Yes, perhaps. Why are you so sad?" Vanya responded. They spent the night in the gazebo with Katya until the early hours of the morning. They reminisced, discussed various topics, and Vanya felt a sense of ease, as if the surroundings were cleaner and lighter. Upon returning home, Vanya quietly lay down on the sofa in the living room, not wanting to disturb Marinka. Her absence at night made her realize that something was amiss. For a week, she hadn't ventured out of the house. Marinka bombarded Vanya with questions about his whereabouts, but he simply claimed to be at work and avoided any confrontation. However, Vanya couldn't get Katya out of his mind. There was something about her that Marinka didn't possess, a genuine sincerity and kindness. Despite her small and unassuming appearance, Katya exuded a special charm. A couple of weeks later, Vanya returned home to discover that Marinka had left. Sonichka, their daughter, had realized the situation and contacted her grandmother, who had taken her away from the household. Vanya's heart sank, as he knew where Marinka had gone, yet he was unsure of what to do next. As they escorted Marinka on her way, they unexpectedly encountered Katya in the courtyard. She appeared embarrassed and blushed, and without knowing how it happened, Vanya invited her to join them at a cafe. Katya was taken aback, but then looked at him defiantly and agreed to go. The children enthusiastically jumped with joy. At the cafe, Ivan ordered almost everything on the menu, ensuring a fun-filled time. Throughout the outing, Vanya couldn't help but observe Katya closely, how she interacted with Andrew, teaching him how to eat cake without making a mess, and answering Sonechka's inquiries. It became evident to Vanya that Katya possessed a nurturing nature and a genuine domesticity. Moreover, he couldn't ignore the fact that Katya was exceptionally beautiful. While Marinka's beauty was glaring and ostentatious, Katya seemed to emanate from within, exuding a delicate grace. Whenever Katya looked at Vanya and smiled slightly, he noticed how she radiated with blossoming charm. Could it be that she still loved him? It seemed implausible, considering their complicated situation, but the fact remained that Katya was not married. "Katya, excuse me for asking, but do you have a husband?" I asked. "No, I don't have a husband and never had one," Katya replied. Vanya, in his foolishness, asked, "Why not?" Embarrassed, Katya looked at him, while Sonia nudged him in the side. "Dad, you can't ask such personal questions to a woman," Sonia scolded him. Realizing his mistake, Vanya wanted to apologize, but Katya had already responded. "You know why, so why ask?" she said. Now it was Ivan's turn to feel embarrassed. He hadn't expected such frankness from Katya. The evening ended awkwardly, and when they returned home, Marinka was already in the kitchen, looking guilty and anticipating a confrontation with Vanya. However, he remained silent. He quietly went into the room and lay down on the sofa. For 3 days, Marinka remained quiet and subdued, but on the 4th day, she started to become restless. Vanya was at home that day, so she couldn't leave. He saw everything, understood everything, and observed with curiosity what would happen next. There was no longer any emotion in his heart. It had all been burned out, as if it had never existed. When he looked at the photos of Marinka with her lover, it was as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. Deep down, he had always known that things would turn out this way. He knew that Sonechka probably wasn't his daughter, but it didn't matter anymore. Both Sonechka and Andreyushka were his children, and he would never give them up to anyone. Ivan's thoughts of Katya consumed him more and more each day. He couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if he had paid attention to her back then. How different would their lives have been? Perhaps they would have built a beautiful family together, filled with laughter and children. Ivan had noticed how much Katya loved taking care of little ones, and he shared that same love for children. In the midst of his thoughts, Ivan's daughter Sonia approached him and sat down beside him on the sofa, embracing him tightly. "Dad, Mom is so angry. She's yelling at us," Sonia whispered. Ivan couldn't help but grin, knowing full well that Marinka's anger stemmed from her longing for her lover's company. She was trapped and couldn't escape. Don't pay her any mind, Sonichka, Ivan comforted his daughter. Sonia reminisced about the time when they lived together, just the two of them. She compared that to the present, where Marinka's rage was often directed at Andrew, her lover. Ivan's gaze fell upon his daughter, realizing something he had never considered before. Andrew's cries echoed through the house, and Ivan knew that Marinka was yelling at him again. He decided to step in. Making his way to the kitchen, Ivan scooped up the crying boy into his arms, comforting him with soothing words. Afterwards, he retreated to the kitchen himself. As he observed Marinka from a distance, Ivan noticed her pouring some sort of pills into her tea. His eyebrow raised, curiosity piqued. He took a step back, pretending to have just arrived. Marinka seemed pleased to see Ivan. "Oh, Vanechka, I was about to follow you. Here, let's have a cup of tea. I have a terrible headache today. Maybe the tea will help," she offered, handing him the mug containing the pills. Was she trying to poison him? No, Ivan couldn't believe she would go that far. But then, what was she up to? Perhaps they were sleeping pills. As Marinka turned her attention to the stove, Ivan discreetly poured the tea into the nearby flower pot. "Sorry, my little flower," he whispered. "I hope it doesn't mind the heat." Marinka glanced at Ivan's mug with surprise. "I was so thirsty. Well, I think I'll go lie down. I could use some sleep," Ivan said, pretending not to suspect anything. Marina cast him a satisfied glance. In the dark, Vanya lay still, listening intently to the commotion in the kitchen. He could hear her phone ringing, hushed and hurried conversations, and then her footsteps entering the room. "Vanya, Vanya," she called out softly. But he remained silent, feigning sleep. Marina left the room, and a moment later, he heard the front door closing gently. Vanya rose from his bed and made his way to the window. Marina was getting into a taxi. That was it. He needed to act quickly to execute his plan. Mindful not to disturb the children, Vanya carefully gathered Marina's belongings. He then placed 2 suitcases and a bag on the landing, ensuring her passport lay on top. Hidden inside the passport were the photos that the detective had delivered to him. Satisfied with his preparations, Vanya returned to bed. Surprisingly, he fell asleep swiftly. A sudden ringing doorbell jolted him awake. Hastily getting up, Vanya opened the door. Marina stood on the threshold with an expression of fear in her eyes. "Vanya, I'll explain everything, I promise. I love you so much. It was a mistake, just a mistake," she pleaded. "Don't make any noise. You'll wake the kids," Vanya stated firmly. "And do me a favor, don't hinder me anymore." With that, he closed the door, leaving Marina staring at it, her eyes filled with hollow horror. Where would she go now? What could she do? She knew all too well that Ivan's calm and composed demeanor was temporary. She decided to give him time to cool down, hoping he would miss her, and then attempt to reconcile. Dialing her lover's number, she said, "Hello, my husband kicked me out. I'll come to you." "Are you out of your mind? Why would I want you here?" her lover responded. "My wife is returning in 2 days. Solve your own problems." The phone emitted short beeps, causing Marina's confusion to grow. The person on the other end of the line was professing their love for her, pleading with her to give them another chance. After enduring 3 unbearable months in a small rented room, Marina had finally reached her breaking point. It was time to confront Vanya, to stop forgiving and forgetting. But as she arrived at their home, she realized that something was amiss. Vanya's car was nowhere to be found, which she convinced herself might actually be a blessing in disguise. She could use this time to clean the neglected house, cook a nice meal, and hopefully have a peaceful reunion in the evening. However, when Marina attempted to enter the house, her key no longer fit the lock. Frustration overcame her, but she vowed to deal with the situation once she had a chance to talk to Vanya. She began calling and knocking on the door, but to no avail. Finally, her neighbor poked their head out, inquiring about Marina's presence. Desperate for answers, Marina asked about Vanya's whereabouts. The neighbor nonchalantly informed her that he had gone to the sea for a vacation. Shocked, Marina could only respond with a bewildered, "The sea?" Marina seethed with anger, her mind consumed by thoughts of her ex-husband Vanya. How could he be so cavalier about leaving her worried and alone, while he gallivanted at sea with their children and his new wife? The sight of her neighbor's twisted face as she slammed the door only intensified Marina's frustration. She had always felt sorry for that woman, never quite understanding her tomboyish ways. Marina couldn't stand idle any longer. She was determined to make Vanya regret the day he was born. An idea sparked in Marina's mind. She decided that reporting him to the police for kidnapping her children was her next course of action. After all, they were officially divorced, and he had no right to take the kids without her consent. But before taking such a serious step, Marina felt it necessary to speak with Vanya's mother. Her plan was to have his mother call him and convey that unless he returned and begged for forgiveness, a police report would be filed against him. With resolve, Marina made her way to Vanya's mother's house. The door opened, revealing a cold and unfriendly face. Undeterred, Marina focused on her mission. "I need to talk to you," she stated firmly. "There's nothing to talk about," came the curt reply. Marina didn't back down. "I will report Vanya to the police for stealing the kids without my knowledge." The response was dismissive. "Well, go ahead and call them." Marina's determination grew stronger. "I will, and you better believe I'll follow through." Her words hung in the air as Marina turned to leave. The confrontation was far from over, but she was determined to fight for her children and make Vanya rue the day he crossed her. Marina snatched the phone, tears streaming down her face, as she sobbed about her husband stealing their children and his mother covering for him. Ivan's mother observed her with curiosity before speaking up. "Well, come in. Why don't we wait for the police at the door?" she said. Marina couldn't comprehend why she appeared so calm, but she reluctantly complied and took a seat. Soon enough, the police arrived. Marina immediately began crying, but she had to forcefully pinch herself in order to stop the tears. Her statements were documented, and then the officers turned to Ivan's mother. "Why are you helping to hide the children?" They questioned her. "From whom? From her?" she retorted. "No one is hiding them. Vanya, my son, went on vacation with his wife and children. As for this woman, his ex-wife, she lost her parental rights 2 weeks ago." She presented her documents and handed them over to the policeman, who thoroughly reviewed them. Meanwhile, Marina watched everything unfold with bewildered eyes. "Why are you behaving like this?" they asked Marina. "You abandoned your children, and now you're causing a scene." I was deprived," Marina struggled to explain. "We sent you multiple letters after you were evicted from the apartment. To the address where you used to live, they countered. You never responded. There are testimonies from neighbors and even private investigators confirming this." "I won't let this go," Marina exclaimed, her voice filled with rage. "They sent this whole thing up. They'll be begging and crying for my mercy. How am I supposed to live now?" Vanya's mother gazed at her and spoke with disdain. "Serves you right, you asshole. People work to make a living, something you clearly don't understand. Is that what you lacked? Vanya does everything for you." The police escorted her out of the apartment and issued a warning that they would take her to the station next time. Marina pulled her arm away and walked off, thinking she needed a plan to win Ivan back. Along the way, she stopped at a pawn shop and exchanged the earrings Ivan had given her in the past for some money. It would be enough to cover a room and some food. For now, she would wait. Every day, Marina went to Ivan's house. Finally, after sitting in the yard for 3 long hours, she saw his car pull into the driveway. Marina fixed her hair and stood up to greet him. Ivan was the first to step out of the car, helping Katerina out. Marina felt like she had seen this girl before. Ah yes, she was from this same neighborhood. But how she had changed, Marina almost didn't recognize her. She was now blossoming. Then the children appeared. Sonia immediately noticed Marina and took a step back, hiding behind her father. She tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, look." Turning around, Ivan's eyes narrowed with anger. He walked towards Marina, grabbed her arm, and pulled her behind a nearby bush before Andrei could see her. Katya saw the fury in Ivan's eyes, hurriedly told Sonia to take her brother home, and followed after her husband. Ivan was livid. It was rare for him to lose his temper, but this was one of those moments. "I told you not to show your face," he spat out. "I'm here for the kids," Marina insisted. "You never cared about those children, and now you come crawling back to them." Ivan's grip on her hand grew tighter and tighter. Just then, Katya caught up to them, pleadingly saying, "Vanetka, let it go. Let's go." And then Marinka was overcome with emotions. She quickly pulled her arm away from Vanya and lunged at Katya, grabbing at her hair and scratching her. Vanya struggled to separate them and pushed Marinka aside. Just then, the children rushed over to them, hugging Katya and asking if she was hurt. Katya tried to calm them down, sitting on the ground. "No, my darlings, I'm fine, just a scratch," she reassured them. Marinka watched this scene with anger and finally spoke up. "Semechka, Andryusha, come to me. I'm your mother, I missed you," she pleaded. However, the children remained rooted in place, not even glancing at her. Marinka raised her voice in frustration. "I said, quickly leave that woman's side and come to your mother." "Do you hear me?" she demanded. Sonia turned to her, her voice firm. "Go away. Don't touch Arcadia. Go away." Marinka couldn't believe what she was hearing. "What are you saying to your mother? You disrespectful girl. You haven't had enough from me." She turned to Andrew. "Go to your mother. He's not even your real father." Vanya, unable to tolerate any more of Marinka's behavior, finally spoke up. He turned to Marinka and warned her, "I'll give you 2 minutes. If you're still here after those 2 minutes, I promise you'll regret it." Marinka recoiled from his intense gaze, but then took a step towards him, hissing, "You'll be sorry." In the evening, the entire family gathered in the kitchen, including Grandma, who hadn't seen them in a while. The grandchildren excitedly shared seashells and small gifts they had bought from street vendors. They avoided discussing the events of the day and instead focused on sharing their fascination with the sea, describing its waves and the warmth of the sunshine. Grandma listened attentively, smiling along with their stories. As the evening grew darker, it was time for everyone to head home. However, their peaceful gathering was abruptly interrupted by a commotion outside. The sound of noise quickly caught their attention, and a bright light illuminated the street. Everyone rushed to the window to see what was happening. To their horror, Ivan's car was on fire, and the flames were spreading to other nearby vehicles. The neighbors who were able to do so quickly drove their cars away, but those in close proximity were also becoming engulfed in the fire. Katya shouted urgently, urging everyone to take action. "Why are you just standing there? We need to do something." One of the neighbors responded, "What can I do? There's nothing left to save." "Is it her fault?" someone asked, suspicion lacing their words. "I think so. I have insurance, and I might be able to recover from this." "But what about the neighbors?" replied another neighbor, regret evident in their voice. "We installed a camera at the entrance a month ago. It's pointed towards the cars. Perhaps it recorded something." Meanwhile, Marinka, unaware of the chaos unfolding outside, celebrated inside her own home. With the last of her money, she bought a bottle of champagne and gleefully opened it, perching herself on the sofa and savoring every sip straight from the neck. Her face lit up with a smile as she contemplated her plans for the future. This was just the beginning. She knew she had more in store. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, interrupting Marinka's thoughts. Puzzled, she wondered who could be at her door. Opening it, she was greeted by police officers. "What do you want?" she asked, a hint of annoyance in her voice. "Gather up, we're coming for you," one of the officers sternly replied. "For me? What is this about?" Marinka questioned, her confusion evident. The officer responded with a serious tone. "Well, in case you weren't aware, it's against the law to set cars on fire." "I didn't burn anything. She burned it herself," Marinka defended herself, worry creeping into her voice. "What's going on?" Marinka hesitated. Absolutely not. She couldn't end up in prison, especially not for something she had been deceived into doing. Being thrown out of her own home. Nobody bothered to listen to her desperate pleas. When she had tried to resist the police officer, scratching at her face in the process, she was immediately handcuffed and told that her already grave sentence would be extended even further. A year had passed since then, and now Katya and Ivan had a newborn daughter. Sonia observed the baby carefully as she was brought home from the hospital, then took it upon herself to look after Andriushka. "Now you're not the smallest one anymore, which means you have to look out for her and play with her," Sonia instructed Andriushka. Andriushka pondered for a moment. He wanted to have fun, but also to be a responsible older brother. And so, he confidently declared, "All right, I'll protect her." The room erupted in laughter at his sincere response.